10 states that could break away from the US in the future. Nostradamus Predictions 2025. Could the United States, long seen as a beacon of strength and unity, one day fracture into independent nations? While it may sound like fiction, growing cultural divides, political unrest, and economic ambition are creating cracks beneath the surface. Some states are already hinting at the desire for more autonomy, and Nostradamus's predictions for 2025 only make things more mysterious. In this video from the Journey of Wisdom, we explore 10 states that could break away from the US in the near future. Which ones are quietly preparing for independence, and why might this actually work? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new insight. Let's begin this journey into the future of a nation once thought unbreakable. 10. California. California, also known as the Golden State, has long felt like more than just another part of the United States. It often feels like a country within a country. With a gross domestic product exceeding $4 trillion in the year 2025, California holds the 5th largest economy in the entire world, standing shoulder to shoulder with full-fledged nations. This immense economic power, combined with strong political influence and a progressive stance on policies, has fueled the idea that California could one day become an independent republic. The movement known as Calexit, once viewed as a fringe idea, has gained surprising momentum, especially as the cultural and political divide between California and the federal government continues to widen. Issues such as immigration, climate change, and social policies clearly show that California is often moving in a completely different direction from Washington. A survey conducted in the year 2024 by the Public Policy Institute of California revealed that 32% of Californians now support the idea of secession, a noticeable increase from 25% just 10 years earlier. Supporters of the movement often point to California's leadership in the technology sector, its vast agricultural output, and a culture that thrives on innovation as key reasons why it could not only survive but actually flourish as an independent state. However, while this vision is exciting for some, it causes concern for others. Critics point out that California relies heavily on imported water, continues to face a prolonged housing crisis, and regularly battles wildfires that pose serious threats to both lives and infrastructure. The state also receives significant federal assistance and benefits from interstate trade networks. Many economists caution that breaking away from the Union could disrupt these essential lifelines in dangerous and unpredictable ways. This discussion reflects a teaching once shared by the Buddha. Unity can only be preserved by understanding, not by force. The urge to separate, whether it is within a country, a family, or even within our own minds, often comes from a lack of true connection, of truly listening to each other and seeing one another with compassion. While many Californians may feel increasingly out of sync with federal decisions, the journey toward independence is tangled with legal, financial, and societal challenges. And here lies a deeper message for all of us in today's world. As individuals, as families, as communities, we all experience moments when we wonder if stepping away from something could finally bring us peace. But just like California, we must carefully look at both our strengths and the systems we depend on. Freedom can feel like the ultimate goal, but at what cost? As philosopher George Santayana once warned, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Throughout history, division has brought both fresh beginnings and great turmoil. For men who are navigating midlife, leadership, or fatherhood, California's story becomes more than politics. It becomes a reflection. California's future is still unfolding, and perhaps so is yours. Because the path forward is not always about standing alone. Sometimes it's about standing together, with clarity, purpose, and courage. 9. Texas. Texas, often called the Lone Star State, has always followed its own rhythm. You may already know this, but Texas was once a nation of its own, an independent republic from the year 1836 to 1845, before it made the choice to join the United States of America. That bold spirit of independence? It never truly faded. In recent years, the concept of Texit, meaning Texas leaving the Union, has gained serious traction. It's no longer just a catchy slogan. It has become part of a very real and ongoing conversation. Some lawmakers have even proposed putting this idea to a public vote. With an economy valued at approximately $2.5 trillion in the year 2025, and as the national leader in both oil and natural gas production, supporters argue that Texas has the resources to stand firmly on its own. But the push for independence isn't driven by economics alone. It's deeply rooted in identity and culture. Many Texans feel disconnected from federal decision-making, especially concerning the right to bear arms, immigration policies, and the management of public lands. A poll conducted by the University of Texas in the year 2025 revealed that 35% of residents currently support the idea of secession, and that number continues to grow. However, here is where things get more complex and more personal. Even with its economic strength, Texas receives billions of dollars every single year in federal assistance, particularly for disaster recovery efforts and healthcare programs. Choosing to walk away from that kind of support isn't a minor change. It would be a monumental shift. Then comes the question of national defense. Texas is deeply integrated into the vast structure of the United States military. Cutting ties with that system would lead to serious logistical and security challenges that couldn't be solved quickly or easily. But beyond the economics and the politics, this conversation reveals something far more human: a longing for control, for clarity, for the right to shape one's own future. Often, what we really want to leave behind isn't a location, it's the emotional weight we carry. It could be frustration, it could be the ache of feeling misunderstood or unheard. The discussion surrounding Texit isn't just about maps and borders. It's about personal identity, about where we feel we belong, and how we find balance between standing alone and working together. Phrases like "don't mess with Texas" or "Texas first" hit hard emotionally, but they also encourage us to reflect more deeply. What does true strength look like in your life? Is it found in walking away from everything, or is it in staying grounded and working through differences? As you follow this unfolding story of Texas, let it serve as a mirror for your own life. Because in the end, whether you're raising a family, building a business, or making important decisions about your future, the real lesson is this: know where your strengths lie. Always question your intentions. And remember that choosing separation does not always mean you are growing. True wisdom is not just about walking away, it's about clearly understanding what it is you're walking toward. 8. Hawaii. Let me take you far, across the ocean, to a place many see as paradise, the islands of Hawaii. But beyond the palm trees, blue waves and tourist resorts, there lies a much deeper story. One of identity, history, and a quiet, steady longing for sovereignty. You see, Hawaii isn't just a vacation spot. It's a place with a soul, shaped by centuries of native tradition and a royal heritage that was disrupted, some would say stolen, when the islands were annexed by the United States in the year 1898. That annexation still sits uncomfortably with many native Hawaiians, and over time, a sovereignty movement has continued to grow, not loudly but persistently, like waves reshaping the shoreline. And now, with younger generations stepping forward, proud of their heritage and eager to reclaim their roots, the idea of Hawaiian independence or higher autonomy is gaining new energy. A recent study from the University of Hawaii in the year 2025 found that 28% of Hawaiians support some form of self-governance, whether complete independence or enhanced autonomy. Hawaii is more than 2,000 miles away from the continental United States, and that physical separation mirrors the emotional distance many locals feel from federal decisions that don't always reflect their values or honor their history. The state's economy, supported by tourism, agriculture, and military contracts, does provide revenue, but the people are asking something deeper. Can a culture survive if it doesn't have the power to guide its own future? This is not just about numbers. It's about the stories passed down through families, the language that was once nearly lost, and the spiritual bond Hawaiians feel with their land. Of course, the challenges are real. Hawaii relies heavily on imported goods, food, fuel, essential supplies. Any move toward full independence would require carefully rethinking logistics, sustainability, and economic partnerships. And from a national perspective, losing Hawaii would drastically alter the United States' strategic positioning in the Pacific, something unlikely to be taken lightly. But still, the cultural revival taking place across the islands, the reclaiming of Hawaiian language, dance, traditions, and land, adds strength to this movement. It's not just about independence for independence' sake. It's about respect, restoration, and reclaiming the right to decide. If you've made it this far, thank you for joining us on this journey into Hawaii's complex path toward possible independence. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below with just 2 words: Hawaii free if you support the idea of more autonomy, or stay united if you believe it should remain part of the US. Let's see where everyone stands. 7. Alaska. Alaska, often referred to as the last frontier, has always stood apart, not just in its remote geography, but in its rugged spirit and deep cultural uniqueness. Since the formation of the Alaska Independence Party back in 1984, the call for a referendum on secession has echoed across snow-covered valleys and windswept towns. For decades, many dismissed the movement as fringe, but lately it's been gaining fresh attention, especially as economic and environmental tensions rise. With vast, untapped natural resources, from oil reserves to fisheries and mineral deposits, Alaska boasts the kind of self-sufficiency that most regions can only dream of. In the year 2025, the state's gross domestic product surpassed $80 billion, driven primarily by resource extraction. And when you consider that Anchorage is geographically closer to Tokyo than to Washington, D.C., the sense of separation from mainland politics becomes more than symbolic. It becomes deeply personal for many Alaskans. Residents often express frustration with federal environmental policies that they believe interfere with local industry and daily life, especially when those policies are crafted thousands of miles away by people who've never set foot on Alaskan soil. But independence isn't just about geography or economics, it's about identity. And here's where the story resonates for all of us. Whether you're a man in his 30s building a new legacy or someone in his 60s reflecting on past decisions, the question Alaska raises is universal. When do we fight to stand alone, and when do we work within a system to survive and thrive? As the Buddha wisely said, just as a solid rock is not shaken by the storm, even so the wise are not affected by praise or blame. That steadiness is what Alaska seeks, to stand on its own values, regardless of outside approval. Still, critics are quick to point out the challenges. Alaska has a small population spread across a vast and often unforgiving landscape. Brutal winters, long supply chains, and heavy dependence on federal funding for defense and critical infrastructure, like the Alaska Permanent Fund, raise real questions about long-term viability. And let's not forget the military angle. Alaska holds a strategically vital position for U.S. national defense, making any talk of independence not just a local issue, but a global one. But despite the odds, the idea of a Republic of Alaska continues to flicker in the minds of those who carry a pioneer's heart. Alaska's independence movement is a reminder that the longing to define your own path is not only natural, it's noble. But it also teaches us this: sovereignty doesn't come easy. It demands grit, planning, and a clear understanding of what we stand to gain and lose. 6. Vermont. Vermont may be one of the smallest states in America, but don't let its size fool you. This place carries a big spirit when it comes to independence. Tucked away in the northeast, Vermont has a unique political identity and a history that's quietly bold. From the year 1777 to 1791, Vermont existed as its own republic, independent, self-governed, and proud. That legacy, though now more than 2 centuries old, still echoes in the minds of many Vermonters today. Inspired by that past, the Vermont Republic movement has continued to question whether the federal government has become too large, too detached, and too slow to respond to the needs of local people. Supporters argue that Vermont's small-scale agriculture, its booming craft beer scene, and its strong local tourism could sustain a more self-reliant path. In the year 2025, Vermont's gross domestic product reached $37 billion. Not a giant figure, but one supported by industries that reflect the state's core values: sustainability, community, and independence. And that's the heart of it. Vermont's culture leans heavily toward cooperation, green living, and progressive politics. Time and again, the state has taken stances that clash with the federal government's views on healthcare, environmental protection, and military spending. A 2024 survey by Castleton University revealed that 21% of residents support the idea of secession. That's not a majority, but it's enough to keep the conversation alive in coffee shops, community meetings, and local debates. But while the heart may dream of independence, the head must consider the facts. 5. Florida. Now let's talk about Florida, known to many as the Sunshine State, a place where beaches, palm trees, and retirees create the image of a laid-back paradise. But beneath the surface of that sunshine is a growing debate that might surprise you. Could Florida actually become its own independent nation? At first glance, the idea seems far-fetched. Florida has long been woven into the fabric of American life, but when you look closer, especially at the state's explosive growth, economic power and cultural complexity, the question starts to feel a little more real. In the year 2025, Florida's gross domestic product surpassed $1.6 trillion, putting it on par with some of the world's most powerful economies. With a booming tourism industry, international ports, and a tax structure that's long attracted new residents and businesses, some argue that Florida has the resources and infrastructure to stand on its own. Florida is a melting pot in every sense of the word. Its population is incredibly diverse, with long-time residents, many of whom voice frustration with federal policies on taxation and immigration, living side by side with newcomers from the northern states who tend to favor unity and stability. That tension plays out politically and socially. A 2025 poll by Florida Atlantic University found that 26% of those surveyed support the idea of independence. That's not a majority, but it's a number large enough to raise eyebrows. And geographically, Florida holds a lot of strategic value. With long coastlines, deep water ports, and a gateway position to Latin America and the Caribbean, it could very well function as a powerful trade hub. It also has a strong state government, a well-developed infrastructure system, and deep local identity. All factors that add weight to the independence conversation. But here's where things get complicated. Florida is also one of the most disaster-prone states in the country, regularly facing hurricanes that cost billions in damage. Much of that recovery is supported by federal disaster aid. On top of that, Florida has a large retirement population that depends heavily on federal programs like Social Security and Medicare. The Buddha once taught, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." That idea rings especially true here. Florida's independence debate isn't about slogans or bold declarations. It's about whether the promise of self-rule can bring real peace, or whether it might open new wounds. You see, this discussion mirrors what many of us feel in our own lives. There are times when we want to break away from a job, a routine, or even a relationship because we feel trapped or unheard. But freedom is not just the absence of attachment, it is the presence of purpose. The truth is, Florida's independence debate says more about the country's divisions than it does about Florida itself. It reflects a broader national conversation about belonging, trust in leadership, and the future direction of American society. And whether Florida ever takes that step or not, the real value lies in the questions being asked. Because, just like a man at a crossroads in life, it's not always about walking away. Sometimes it's about pausing long enough to know why you would, and whether doing so would bring you closer to peace or push you further from it. 4. Oregon. Oregon, with its lush forests, misty coastlines, and independent streak, may not always make the headlines when people talk about states breaking away, but under the surface there's a quiet tension that makes the question of secession or expanded autonomy more than just a fringe idea. With a population of just over 4,233,000 people as of the year 2023, Oregon has long stood out for its progressive values and environmental consciousness, often finding itself at odds with federal policies that seem out of sync with the identity of its people. Economically, it holds more weight than its size might suggest, generating around $261 billion in gross domestic product, thanks largely to industries like real estate, manufacturing, and healthcare. But With prosperity also comes inequality. In cities like Portland, a growing number of households, roughly 30% as of 2024, are struggling with housing costs, spending more than a third of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. That tension between growth and affordability is creating frustration, especially among younger families trying to stay rooted in a place they love but can barely afford. And when it comes to politics, Oregon is dominated by Democratic leadership, from the governor to the Secretary of State to the Attorney General, reflecting the liberal leanings of most urban voters. Yet that dominance has also created friction, particularly in rural eastern Oregon, where people often feel their voices are drowned out by the political choices of the more populated West. Issues like environmental regulations and gun rights only deepen the divide between city and countryside. Even within Portland, often praised for its culture and creativity, residents are growing uneasy as crime rates climb, especially property crime, which now stands above the national average. For Oregonians, that island might be the dream of self-determination, of shaping a system that reflects their values without having to fight for every inch. But the deeper lesson here touches all of us. Maybe you're not living in Oregon, but maybe you felt the same thing, like you're part of a system that no longer reflects who you are, or that your voice has been lost in the noise. Thanks for tuning in. Now it's your turn. Leave a quick comment below with Oregon free if you support the idea of more autonomy, or stay together if you think Oregon should remain just as it is. Just 2 words. Let us know where you stand. 3. New Hampshire. New Hampshire, the land of granite hills and bold ideas, isn't just a pretty piece of New England. It's a place with a powerful motto that you've probably heard before: live free or die. That's not just a line on a license plate. For many in New Hampshire, it's a way of life. It speaks to a culture rooted in self-reliance, personal liberty, and deep skepticism of centralized authority. That mindset is what's been fueling talk of independence for years now. Groups like the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance and other liberty-femic organizations have been pushing for greater autonomy, even proposing steps towards secession, arguing that the federal government has become too bloated, too far removed and too intrusive in the lives of everyday people. And the truth is, when you look at the numbers, New Hampshire actually stands on fairly solid ground. By the year 2025, its gross domestic product reached $96 billion. Not massive, but for a small state, it's impressive, thanks to a strong manufacturing base and a business-friendly environment. The unemployment rate remains low, and many believe the state could manage itself without needing constant direction from Washington, D.C. Supporters of independence often point to New Hampshire's location near the Canadian border, its relatively small size, and its culture of independence as factors that could help it navigate the complexities of self-governance. In a 2024 survey by the University of New Hampshire, 29% of respondents said they supported at least exploring the idea of becoming independent, a clear sign that this conversation isn't going away anytime soon. Still, there are challenges. New Hampshire does rely on federal funding for key areas like healthcare and education, and with a smaller population, long-term sustainability would require careful planning and strong partnerships. But what makes this state story resonate isn't just politics. It's that deep commitment to the idea that people should have control over their own lives. It reminds me of a story from the Buddhist tradition. Once, a monk asked the Buddha, "Master, what is the path to true freedom?" And the Buddha replied, "It is not found in running from the world, but in understanding your relationship to it. That insight is so relevant here, because whether you're talking about a state or your own personal life, the question isn't always about breaking away. Sometimes it's about becoming more conscious of the forces shaping your world and choosing how you respond. In your life, where are you seeking more freedom? Is there a job, a relationship, or a belief system that no longer aligns with your values? Are you feeling like decisions are being made on your behalf by people who don't know your struggles, your story, or your dreams? New Hampshire's independence debate is really about one thing: ownership. Ownership of your choices, your direction, your identity, and whether or not the state ever becomes its own republic, the lesson it offers is clear. Freedom isn't just something given, it's something built, day by day, through awareness, courage, and the willingness to question the status quo. Because in the end, as the Buddha also said, no one saves us but ourselves. No one can, and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path. 2. Colorado. Colorado might surprise you by showing up on a list of states that could break away from the United States, but when you take a closer look at the political and economic shifts happening there, the reasoning becomes clearer. Known for its breathtaking outdoor landscapes and booming tech hubs, Colorado has grown into a powerhouse of both adventure and innovation. By the year 2025, its gross domestic product had climbed past $460 billion, driven by everything from legal cannabis to a thriving tourism industry and cutting-edge renewable energy development. But beneath that economic success lies a growing divide, not just between political ideologies, but between rural life and urban power. While cities like Denver and Boulder continue to expand and dominate the state's policies, many rural counties, especially in the northern part of the state, feel overlooked, even forgotten. Back in 2024, a group of northern counties even attempted to form a new state, North Colorado, claiming that the state and federal governments no longer represented their values or priorities. That frustration, the feeling of being spoken for rather than listened to, is something many men across America can relate to. Maybe you've felt it too. Maybe in your own life, there's been a time when you looked around and wondered, when did this stop reflecting who I am? Colorado's supporters of autonomy often point to the state's ability to thrive on its own. Billions of dollars flow in each year from tourism and the cannabis industry, and the state has become a leader in clean energy, two traits that build the case for self-reliance. But just like in life, strength on the surface doesn't always mean you're ready to walk alone, because independence comes with a cost. Federal support helps maintain Colorado's infrastructure, national parks and military bases, and walking away from that funding would create real challenges. And let's not forget, as of a recent survey in 2025, only 24% of Colorado residents said they supported the idea of independence. That number reminds us that while the conversation is alive, it's far from settled. And that's where the deeper meaning comes in. You see, this isn't just about Colorado. It's about the constant pull between staying part of something bigger or stepping out to create something new. The Buddha once said, "There is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path." That's a reminder that the journey toward change, whether it's personal or political, needs to be approached with clarity and intention, not just reaction. 1. New York. New York, known far and wide as the Empire State, might seem like the least likely candidate to break away from the United States. With its towering skyline, global financial power, and iconic role in shaping American culture, New York has long stood as a symbol of unity through diversity. And yet, beneath the surface of its glittering city lights, there's a growing tension, one that's causing some to ask, could New York actually split apart? At the heart of this conversation is the divide between New York City and the rural regions of upstate New York. Supporters of independence don't necessarily want to secede from the US altogether. They often want separation from each other. Many in upstate feel that the city dominates the state politically and economically, siphoning resources and influence while ignoring the needs of smaller towns and agricultural communities. A 2025 survey from Siena College revealed that 30% of upstate residents support at least considering secession. Meanwhile, supporters within New York City argue that the metropolis could easily stand alone, powered by its enormous economy, over $2.1 trillion in gross domestic product, and global clout through Wall Street, tourism, media, and culture. But this isn't just about economics or governance. It's about identity, about the sense of being unheard or overruled by a system that no longer reflects your daily life. And that's something many of us can relate to. Whether you live in the heart of Manhattan or in a small town miles away, have you ever felt like your values were being shaped by people who don't understand your experience? The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "When you love someone, the best thing you can offer is your presence." In the same way, when a community or a state doesn't feel seen, it begins to drift, to detach. And that's what's happening in New York. Rural voices feel distant from urban decisions. Urban progress feels stifled by political battles over rural policies. And so the debate over independence, whether it's for New York City or upstate, becomes less about rebellion and more about the search for relevance and fairness. But stepping away isn't easy. Legal, financial, and logistical challenges loom large. Federal aid, tax agreements, shared infrastructure, all of it would become tangled in difficult negotiations. And in truth, this debate mirrors something much bigger than New York. It reflects what's happening across the country, growing polarization, widening economic gaps, and a sense that the American experiment in unity is under pressure like never before. In your own life, where do you feel divided? Is there a relationship, personal or professional, where you've been going along out of habit, not because it still works for you? Are you compromising your values just to keep the peace? Or are you brave enough to examine whether that union still serves your growth? New York's story reminds us that strength isn't just in staying together. It's in the courage to ask what kind of togetherness truly honors everyone involved. As the Buddha once taught, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. And maybe, just maybe, the path forward for New York, for the country, for all of us, begins not with separation, but with listening, presence, and the willingness to rebuild connection with purpose. Which of these states do you think could truly break away in the future? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Journey of Wisdom. Make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming stories that explore the deeper currents shaping our world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.